I never told my son what I really kept behind the false wall of my boat repair shop. When he married a woman who could smell money through steel and concrete, I made sure she would never find the ledger. Then one night my foreman called me in a dead panic. "Boss, your daughter-in-law is here." She brought a locksmith and a man with a truck. I did not panic. I had been waiting 3 months for this exact moment, and what I did next ended her greedy little game for good. If you're riding along with me tonight, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss my next story. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I love knowing who's out there with me. It was 10:15, and the marina was quiet, except for the halyards clinking against the masts in the wind. I'm Walter Briggs. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 44 years pulling engines out of dead boats and putting them back together better than new. People look at me now, gray stubble, oil-stained cap, a limp in my left knee from a winch that got away from me in '94, and they think there goes a simple man who fixes boats. They don't know what it took to build Briggs Marine Salvage out of a rented slip and a toolbox I still own. They don't know what a man learns about people after 40 years of watching who pays their bill on time and who disappears the moment it comes due. My phone buzzed on the counter. Not many people have that number. One of them is Ray Delgado, a former harbor patrol officer who's run my shop floor with total loyalty for 18 years. "Walt, it's happening," Ray said. "Vanessa's at the North Building. She's got a locksmith and a guy with a flatbed." I set down my coffee. "Is Danny with her?" "No, just her, the locksmith, and the driver. She's got paperwork, waving it at anybody who'll look." "Let her in, Ray. Don't call the police. Pull the guys back and let her walk right up to that door." Ray hesitated the way a man does when he thinks his boss has lost his mind. "You sure, Walt? She means business." "I'm sure," I said, my hand resting near the small brass frame that held a photo of my late wife, Carol. Tonight she finds out exactly what kind of trap she's been building for herself. To understand how a woman ended up outside my storage building with a locksmith at 10 at night, you have to go back 3 months, to the day I felt the first cold prickle of doubt crawl up my neck. My son Danny is 34. Good kid, soft in some ways, quick to trust, quicker to forgive. He runs the customer-facing side of my shop. When Carol passed 4 years ago, I promised her at the graveside I'd watch over that boy, because Danny has never once imagined another person could want to hurt him. He married Vanessa a 1.5 years ago. Brand consultant, laptop, ring light, 40,000 followers watching her preach abundance mindset between ads for teeth-whitening strips. She never had much money before Danny. After Danny, she suddenly had opinions about our family's money. It started at their anniversary dinner. Vanessa set her wine glass down a little too hard. "Walter," she said, that camera-ready smile switching on, "I drove past the marina last week. That big storage building on the north end, past the fuel dock, always locked up. What is that place?" I chewed slow. Inside, every alarm I owned started ringing. I'd never once discussed that building with her. There was no reason on God's green earth for a woman who sells skincare routines online to know it existed. "Old equipment shed," I said. "Nothing but spare parts and dust." "No reason," she said, light as air. "Just seems like a lot of waterfront acreage for a junk closet. Have you thought about selling? I know developers who'd kill for that lot." Danny grinned at her, blind to the hunger that flickered behind her eyes for half a second before the smile came back. My gut, the same gut that spent 40 years spotting a con man before he opened his mouth, told me something was very wrong. The next morning they showed up at 9 with a leather folder full of pie charts, tax estimates, a red circle drawn around my storage building on an aerial map. "You're bleeding money on that shed, Walter," she said, rehearsed concern dripping from every word. "I've got developer contacts. No hassle. You wouldn't lift a finger." Danny nodded along like scripture. I flipped through her paperwork slow, letting her think every word landed. What she didn't know was that public tax records don't tell you a single true thing about what's actually inside that building. "I never sign anything the same day I read it," I said. "Let me sit with this a week." Her jaw ticked, the first crack in the mask. As I walked them out, her eyes drifted to the hallway closet where I keep a fireproof filing cabinet. 2 seconds too long. 2 seconds was all I needed. I wasn't going to accuse her of anything. Accuse her, and Danny defends her with his whole chest, and I become the bitter old man trying to ruin his son's marriage. I had to let her think she was winning, Feed the greed until it made her reckless enough to show Danny who she was, in her own words. I called Ray. Pull the old lease papers on the north building. Copies only. My name as owner. Tax numbers. Leave out the Harbor Authority contract. Make it look like a plain storage shed. We setting a trap, boss? We're baiting one. 2 weeks of silence. I dodged her calls, let her stew. The crack showed on a Tuesday outside Danny's bait and tackle shop, the one thing entirely his, built with 3 years of saved money. I was walking up with his coffee when I saw a tow truck backed against his delivery van, already grinding it up off the pavement. Dad, Danny said, pale. They're saying we missed 3 lease payments. That's impossible. Vanessa handles the account. Mistake, friend, I told the driver. Recovery order came in yesterday. 90 days delinquent. Not my problem. Tires screeched. Vanessa's sedan swung in, and she came running, hair a mess, mascara smudged. Nothing like the woman filming 12-minute skincare videos. Stop right there, she shouted. Banking error. Drop that vehicle. Account's empty, ma'am. Payments bounced. She paced in tight circles, hissing into her phone about a fraud flag, and 10 frantic minutes later, bought 30 days from whoever was on the other end. The van came down. Danny hugged her, relieved. But over his shoulder, for one bare second, her mask slipped completely. And what I saw wasn't embarrassment. It was fear. Women running 6-figure consulting businesses don't have their husband's van repossessed over a glitch. My gut, already suspicious, turned into something close to certainty. Vanessa was drowning in debt, quietly draining Danny's shop to keep her head above water, hunting for a bigger score to bail herself out completely. That bigger score was my North Storage building. That Friday they showed up with overnight bags, claiming a burst pipe. I knew better, but I smiled and gave them the spare room, because I needed her close. At 2 a.m, the third stair groaned. Through the crack in my study door, I watched Vanessa kneeling in front of the filing cabinet, a pen light between her teeth, working the lock with a thin metal pick. She wasn't a professional, she was a desperate woman who'd run out of patient options. I let her get the drawer open before I flipped the hallway light on. Vanessa, what are you doing down here in the dark? She recovered fast. I couldn't sleep. Looking for water, got turned around. Kitchen's the other way. I let her go back to bed. Checked the drawer after. She'd found the folder with my property records. And in her panic to close things up, she'd left it sticking out just enough to tell me exactly what she'd been hunting for. The next morning I hired Marcus Webb, a private investigator I'd used before when I needed the truth fast. 3 days later, he slid into a diner booth with a thick folder and tired eyes. You were right to be suspicious, Walter. Her consulting business is mostly smoke. 2 paying clients all year. Everything online is staged for the followers, and the followers are the product. A course on financial freedom from a woman with nothing herself. Credits maxed 6 ways. 2 years ago, she put family money into an online trading scam, lost nearly all of it in a weekend. When the banks cut her off, she went looking for private money. She currently owes just under $180,000 to a man named Sal Petrone, who does not run a bank. He runs a very different kind of business out on the east side. My stomach went cold. There's more. She's been skimming from Danny's shop account for 10 months, small amounts dressed up as supply orders. That's why the van got repossessed. Keep it up, and that shop closes by the end of the season. She had put my son's life's work at risk, put debt collectors on his doorstep, and lied to his face every single day. That was a line that didn't get uncrossed. You want me to call it in? Marcus asked. I shook my head. If police pick her up now, Danny thinks it's a misunderstanding. He forgives her. I need him to see it himself, with his own eyes, so there's no story left for her to spin. I found Ray in the back office that afternoon. I need a fake inventory sheet, something a desperate person would risk everything for. How valuable? Marine salvage electronics. Untraceable, high resale, sitting in the north building. Make it look like it's been there for years, off the books. We built a manifest, recovered navigation systems, and sonar equipment pulled from decommissioned military surplus, worth an estimated $400,000, stamped confidential in red ink, and slid it into the same drawer she'd already cracked once. Then I had 3 hidden cameras installed in my study, disguised as a smoke detector, a clock radio, a phone charger, all covering that cabinet. That night at dinner, Vanessa was glowing with nervous energy, knee bouncing under the table. Around midnight, the floor groaned again. I watched on my phone as she found the folder, read every word, mouth slightly open like a woman looking at a winning lottery ticket, and photographed each page with shaking hands. The next morning, I slipped a small listening device into the lining of her purse while she showered. By that afternoon, sitting in my truck 2 blocks away, I heard her make the call. "Sal, listen to me. I found something bigger, way bigger than the shop money. There's a warehouse, my father-in-law's storage building, full of recovered marine electronics. 400 grand, easy, completely off the books. Nobody's watching it." The voice on the other end was low and flat. "You said that about the shop money too. This is real. I saw the paperwork myself. Give me the crew. I'll get you the door codes. Clean it out in one night. And your husband?" She didn't hesitate. "He'll never know it was me. Let him think it was random. I'm done with him and this whole sad little marina town once this clears." I sat in my truck, feeling something in my chest go cold and still. She wasn't just stealing from an old man's shed. She was willing to let armed men break into a building carrying her own husband's name and vanish afterward without a second thought for what happened to him. I stopped feeling anything close to mercy for her right then. What she and her hired men didn't know is that the North Storage Building hasn't held spare parts in 5 years. 3 years ago, the Regional Maritime Authority approached me quietly about a piece of isolated waterfront land. Easy access for barges, easy to secure. I leased them the building to serve as a staging site for federal drug interdiction operations along the coast. From the outside, it still looks like a rusted-out shed I never bothered to fix. That's the point. Inside, it's wired with motion sensors, silent alarms tied straight to Coast Guard and Federal Task Force dispatch, with an armed detail on site around the clock. Because sometimes what gets stored there overnight is evidence in ongoing federal cases. I gave her the 5 days her creditor demanded. One evening, I drove Danny out near the marina and opened my laptop, showing him the security feed inside a building he'd walked past his whole life without a second thought. I told him the truth plainly, without softening a word. His wife had lost her savings to a scam, owed a dangerous man real money, had been bleeding his shop account dry for the better part of a year, and had just sold a fake inventory list to a criminal crew to save herself, telling them he'd never know it was her. Danny went white and silent in a way I'd never seen. He wanted to argue, to defend her the way he always has, but the words wouldn't come. At midnight, headlights swept the lot. A dark van rolled up outside the north building. 3 men climbed out, 2 of them carrying rifles slung across their chests, and Vanessa behind them in dark clothes, holding bolt cutters like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. Danny made a sound beside me I'll never forget. We heard her voice through the feed. "No cameras on this fence. The old man doesn't believe in security. I've got the door code memorized. 20 minutes, in and out. This better be real," one of the men grunted. "Or you're explaining it to Sal." "It's real. I saw the manifest myself." She cut the chain. The gate screeched open. She punched in the code she'd photographed off my fake paperwork, and the moment she and the 2 armed men crossed the threshold, the entire lot lit up like daylight. A federal siren tore through the night. Danny grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark. Armed agents poured out from 3 directions, weapons raised. The 2 men with rifles went down immediately, faces in the dirt, no argument. Vanessa screamed that it was a mistake, that she was just visiting her father-in-law's property, right up until an agent had her face down in the gravel, with her wrists zip-tied behind her back. Danny didn't say a word the whole drive home. Somewhere past the marina, I heard him start to cry, quiet, the way a grown man cries when something inside him breaks clean in half. 3 days later, his phone rang from a number neither of us recognized. A collect call from the county detention center. Vanessa's voice came through, high and frantic, spinning a story about being in the wrong place at the wrong time, begging him to wire bail, telling him none of it was what it looked like. Something in Danny's face finally hardened all the way through. "I heard everything, Vanessa," he said. "I watched you say I'd never know it was you." Then he hung up and blocked the number, and he didn't shed one more tear over her after that. Federal charges followed for all 3 of them: conspiracy, attempted theft of federal property, weapons charges for the men she'd hired. A judge denied every one of them bail. There wasn't a lawyer alive who could talk her way out of what 3 federal agents had on video. Danny filed for divorce that same week. The shop, free of whatever she'd been bleeding out of it, started climbing back within a month. About 6 weeks later, I sat him down at Carol's old kitchen table and slid a small brass key across to him. He looked at it the same confused way his mother used to look at me before a surprise. I told him that a man who spends his life pulling engines out of dying boats learns early that you never keep your real treasure somewhere a stranger might think to look. 3 years before Carol passed, we'd quietly set up a trust in Danny's name alone, separate from the shop, from the house, from anything a stranger could easily trace. Vanessa had spent a year and a half hunting for a fortune hidden in a rusted storage shed, never once suspecting the real inheritance had been sitting untouchable in his name the entire time, because she never believed an old man in an oil-stained cap could outthink her. He hugged me the way he used to when he was 7 and scared of a thunderstorm. I held on and didn't let go for a good long while. That Sunday evening I sat on the dock behind the shop with a glass of bourbon, watching the last light go orange over the water, thinking about Carol, about the promise I made her at the graveside. I raised my glass to the water and said it out loud, just for her to hear. Greed always shows its true face eventually, if you're patient enough to wait for it. You can build the prettiest life on top of a lie, but sooner or later the foundation cracks, and everybody standing on it goes down with it. What actually protects a family isn't money sitting in a warehouse or an account somebody can find if they dig hard enough. It's the years you put in when nobody's watching, and the promises you keep long after the person you made them to is gone. If this story taught you that karma always finds its way home, hit that like button and tell me down in the comments, have you ever had someone marry into your family who turned out to be after something other than love? I read every single one. Until next time, take care of the people who'd take a bullet for you, and keep a close eye on the ones who wouldn't.